I told you a little bit about our organization. So as I said, we do community events and talk to parents a lot, but we also talk to, now these days we're talking to prescribers, because people who are prescribing opioids, of course, are needing to be much better informed about how we're getting into this crisis that we have now, where we're losing so many people to overdose deaths. And I just want to ask very quickly, if you're willing to share this, if you'd raise your hand if you know of someone who has died from an overdose. Doesn't have to be close personal family. Wow, look around the room. It's a lot. That's way too many in my world, in our world, way too many. So we're in a new paradigm here, so it's so important that we talk about this stuff and stave this off as best we can. And this is our mission. I won't read it to you. You can read it. You can learn all about us. But here's a little bit, too, about our format tonight. We're going to start with this presentation. We're going to do some breakout groups. Can you also raise your hand if you're a facilitator? Thank you for your service. I really appreciate you being here. Those facilitators will kind of huddle up some chairs after this and do some little workshop-y stuff. And you'll really appreciate it. I think you get so much more out of it when it's interactive. You'll learn more about that in a little bit. And then we do our feedback and interactive stuff. It'll all make sense as we go along. And we have materials out in the hallway. We have providers who are here from treatment centers, inpatient, outpatient, other services. Be a part of the conversation. It has a whole table full of stuff. But also, and this is really important, if you registered on Eventbrite, and if you didn't, if you gave us your email address out there, you will get an email from us saying, here's the link to the follow-up page. So sometime tomorrow, after I take a nap, we're going to have all this information that you have here tonight, everything that's in the PowerPoint, the little videos that we're going to show, and all the materials that we have on our table that are pickups. If we run out of them or something, all of that's going to be in PDF form on the website. So everything is available to you sometime tomorrow.
And we also link to that on our website as well. So if you can't find it that way, we will have it on our website as well. And I'll try to put it front and center in our news feed on our website as well, so you can access it there.
Thank
And
you.
probably I forgot to mention that we'll be archiving the video from tonight, so
Right.
we'll post that as well.
Which we're thrilled about. Okay, so this is why we're here. This is why it's so important that we talk to parents. You are the greatest influence in your child's life. It may not feel like it all the time when you have a teenager especially, but you absolutely are their greatest influence. So your becoming knowledgeable is so important. We did a program a couple of weeks ago about vaping, and one of the questions we had from the parent was like, okay, so my kids are really mad at me because I'm here. So good, that's probably a good thing. We don't always have to make them happy that we're learning about these things. So I'm really glad that you're all here. And this is why it's so important that we understand the relationship between adolescence and substance use. And just as a really quick science lesson, our brains, all of our brains develop from the back to the front. So physical coordination, the ability to play with blocks and things like that, that's the first thing that we have working for us. And then we have emotion. Anybody seen teenagers be emotional? They've got lots of good emotions. And they are very motivated. This also makes them very willing to take risks. This is why they can learn language so much better when they're younger, sports, musical instruments, and so on. So they're learning, they're absorbing, but they're also taking a lot of risks and things that perhaps later on in life, when you have a fully developed frontal lobe, that's when you start putting on the brakes a little bit. So I've heard it described that a teen will have the accelerator working really well, but not so much the brakes. So that's where the parents come in. There's an expression that parents need to be the frontal lobe. And this is why, because not until we're 25 years old is our frontal lobe fully developed to make those executive decisions. So we can see kids get emotional about someone, who was killed in a drunk driving accident. And we think like, oh, they're going to understand this now. Unfortunately, they don't always make that connection that this might be harmful to me, I'm going to have to stop drinking now, or something like that. So we really need to be intervening at this point in their lives when they're still teenagers. Really, really important. Okay, and that just kind of wraps it up. All right, and I think this is such an important statistic. This kind of just shows us the importance of holding off on that substance use until you're over the age of 21. Look at the difference in your potential for becoming addicted to drugs or alcohol if you start using substances before 18 versus until you wait until after you're 21. 1 in 4 versus 1 in 25. All right, and this is the amount of alcohol that's being consumed by, we have 11% of this country's alcohol being consumed by 12 to 20-year-olds. There's a lot of alcohol being consumed in the United States, an awful lot of alcohol. 12 to 20-year-olds are consuming 11% of it. That's a lot. So we hear this from folks who are working in the guidance offices, student assistance programs. Alcohol is absolutely still a problem for our young kids. And so that's why it's very important, as I said earlier, that we are the messengers, that we just think and be a little bit mindful about, you know, okay, I'm over 21, I don't have a drinking problem, I'm entitled to have a glass of wine in the evening or with a friend if I would like to. Absolutely nothing wrong with that, right? Well, there isn't. But just be mindful about the message that you're sending. Like, so as you're pouring the glass of wine, are you saying like, oh, do we really want vodka because it was such a bad day, you know, or whatever? Just because our kids pick up on this stuff and they really do connect the dots to this is the way to self-soothe, to make myself feel a little better, to get over bad feelings. Just wanted to share that with you. And also, so we're getting into, we're still kind of in the little bit of the safe zone right in here. Kids pick up alcohol for the first time primarily over the summer months and over the holiday seasons. Not very surprising, really, but I just want to kind of pause here because as we're getting into graduation parties, prom season, and that sort of thing, I've been talking to parents for the last 7 years about this stuff, and what I hear a lot of the time, and by the way, big footnote here, I am making no judgments about decisions parents make regarding alcohol, okay? I would like for us to all just agree that any decisions we've made before today doesn't matter, but going forward, I just like you to think about things in this way, okay? If we decide that it's safer to let them drink at home, if we decide that I'm going to take their keys and we've already called the friends' parents and said we're just going to get them some beers, but we're taking their keys. First of all, we've had kids tell us, well, we bring keys to the Volkswagen that we haven't had for 10 years. And we give those to the parents, but we still have our keys. They're really smart. So that's really not a safe way to go with this. Also, when you are introducing alcohol, there are a lot of other things that can happen. So what else can go wrong besides just the alcohol? Unprotected sex. So we know statistically that lots of teens are worried about contracting STDs or becoming pregnant because they've been drinking and they don't remember, they blacked out. We did a presentation years ago in another school district where I had a young woman with me who wanted to share her story. She was 26, I believe, and had an 8-year-old, and she called him her prom baby. And this was her story. And so absolutely a cautionary tale, absolutely still happens, blackout drinking is a thing. What else can go wrong once you've been drinking underage? Social media. Now this is a bit of an old picture, you know, this is like an older handheld device, but you know, smartphones, right? So this happens all the time when kids are shamed the next day on Instagram, Snapchat, whatever. So another bad thing that can happen. What else can go wrong is now that you don't have that fully functional frontal lobe anyway, and now you've been using substances, so your inhibitions are down. You're much more likely to try a pill or another drug that the really cute guy is offering to you or the really cute girl is offering to you. There was another point I would check with this. Sorry, I blanked out on the next point that I was going to make. Anything from you guys that you wanted to say about this stuff? Am I catching everything? Yeah. Okay. And also, this is. I'm going to be a little bit snarky here for just a minute. Would you go shoplifting with your son or daughter to connect with them, to bond or whatever? Of course you would not. But I just want to point out that serving a minor is actually a stronger charge than shoplifting. It's a heavier charge than it's there are more penalties involved with serving minors. And the reason I'm pointing this out is, this is the one law we're going to break as a family, is we're going to let you drink. So we've made this decision, and we would like to think that the kids are hearing us say, only drink at home, only drink with mom and dad. But I know my parents would let me have a glass of wine when I was in high school. All I cared was that they let me have a glass of wine. And then I drank with my friends because it was much more fun to drink with my friends than with my mom and dad. So we would love to think that that's going to keep them safe, but it actually doesn't. Also, you're introducing a substance to a still developing brain. And if that developing brain has ADHD, if that developing brain has anxiety or any other kind of mental health challenges, much more likely to decide that this is what's going to make them feel good. We hear people in recovery talk about it all the time. Once they had their first sip of alcohol, once they had dextromethorphan, which we'll talk about in a little bit, any kind of even over-the-counter medications that kind of lights them up, they seek it out. And we hear these stories over and over again. If you can wait, if you think back to that slide, wait until you're over 21 or even better 25, your chances are so much better of not having problems. So if we can, as a community, decide we're just not going to go for that anymore. You know, we're not going to have underage drinking parties anymore. I would love to see that happen. And here's a really important study that was done that says permissive drinking in the home actually leads to more drinking and more misuse of substances. And again, the power of the parents. Permissiveness at home affects adolescent choices more than peer pressure. Okay. We're going to slip into medications just a little bit here. Oh, I thought I pulled this one out. Oh well, here it is. Okay. We were deciding which slides to show. We have a couple of slides about this. So 1 in 9 youth between age 12 to 25 have used prescription drugs non-medically within the past year. Here are just some examples of some of the medications we're talking about. But also, 1 in 5 teens believe that it's okay to abuse a prescribed drug as long as they weren't doing so to get high. So there's a lot of misinformation, you know, and it's not just kids. I hear it from adults a lot too. Well, the doctor prescribed it, you know, so even though it was for my surgery a couple years ago, I'm going to hang on to them and continue to keep them available to me. You know, we have a counselor that I work with who says, you know, he's got kids that have ADHD, and they'll say, well, I'm supposed to take the Adderall. You know, yes, I'm snorting it 3 times a day, but it's my doctor said I need it, and it helps me. They really, truly don't make that connection. And Adderall is an amphetamine, highly addictive. It's the study drug that was one of the things that took my son into addiction very heavily and quickly. So another really, and he doesn't have ADHD, by the way, but got his hands on it very easily. So it's really important to be aware of this. And I think it also kind of slides under the radar a lot because, you know, finding vodka in their backpack or in you know, the schools, they might find vodka, they might find marijuana, but they really don't see what's happening with the pills. Hearing a lot about benzodiazepines in the high schools as well these days. So that would be like Valium and Xanax, that sort of thing. 12th graders who received a prescription for pain pills were 33% more likely to develop an opiate addiction between the ages of 19 and 25. 19 to 25 is when the real stuff starts happening, and so we really would hate to see kids getting started unnecessarily. You know, pain is a real thing, but if there are, let's see, I'm going to jump ahead because, yeah, I'm going to stop on that in a second. All right. Medications, please, 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 if you have meds in your home, keep them under lock and key. If you're finished with them or they're expired, please take them to a police precinct nearby. Almost every police precinct in Montgomery County has a drop box where you can safely, without anybody asking you any questions, put meds, anything in that drop box. It's much better than flushing them down the toilet so that they don't get in the water system or in landfills as well. So really important to do that. But I just wanted to go briefly into why it is that some people who are prescribed an opioid, who take dextromethorphan, who smoke a blunt, drink a little alcohol, why this affects some people and not others. And there are lots and lots of reasons, but very generally can be genetics is a very big piece of this. If you have a family history of diabetes or hypertension, you're absolutely going to share with your son or daughter, you know, we're going to have to watch our diet and maybe exercise a little bit more because our family's vulnerable. Same thing with alcoholism, addiction, and process addictions like gambling. Those are also risk factors for generations to come. Psychosocial, so this could be, you know, as I mentioned before, a diagnosis of ADHD or depression or anxiety or bipolar disorder. Environmental, so if you live someplace where there's easy access to drugs, if mom and dad, you know, are struggling with a substance use issue themselves, that would be an environmental factor. And all of this is elevated by the age of the onset of use. So again, going back to that underdeveloped brain. Also want to point out big risk factors, transition periods, just want to make you aware of this. So A lot of times transitioning, we see it in these PACE surveys and things, transitioning from middle school to high school can be a really rough time. Also naturally, going from high school into college is a really risky period of time because they're under a lot of stress, you're under a lot of stress, you're trying to find the balance between parenting and letting go. And of course, this is so important. Things you can do, please refuse to supply alcohol to anyone under 21. It just makes so much sense. Be at home when your teen has a party, keeping an eye on things. By the way, the window wells in your game room, real easy access for folks. I hear that story quite a bit. Make sure that alcohol is not brought into your home by your friend's friend, your teen's friends. Talk to other parents about not providing alcohol. Report underage drinking to local law enforcement. And absolutely nothing wrong with that. It's illegal. If you have other legal activities, I would hope you would do the same. Create alcohol-free opportunities and activities in your home so that your teen feels welcome to participate with the family without alcohol. Oh, some real quick, wonder why that didn't come up. That's weird. Oh, my snowplow didn't come up. That's really weird. It's not there. Huh. So I had this really cool image of a snowplow plowing away the snow. Isn't that strange?
That's weird.
It was just there.
That's weird.
So you've all heard of the helicopter parent, right? That's hovering and checking the grades and all that stuff. So there's a new one for you, snowplow parents. So imagine the big piles of snow in the street are, I forgot my homework, and can you call my boss because I don't want to go to work today, and all the things in life that are bumps and challenges, and my girlfriend broke up with me or whatever. Snowplow parents just smooth all that out of the way. I'll take care of that, sweetie. I'm going to do that for you, right? So just to be mindful of. I love metaphors and I love visuals. And like nothing's working. So not really good visuals when they're not visible. Well,
Yeah,
there's
there you
one
go.
of them.
Yeah.
Oh, I missed the weight. That's so weird. Okay, here's
Well,
another
your
one.
woman showed up for the wait.
What's that?
Your woman
She
was
did
there,
for a
but
second.
nothing
Now
else.
she's gone. Anything from? No. Okay. So there's another one for you. I have this great picture of a mom talking to her son, and the mom's going like this, and she's saying something to him. And the point of that is he's just said something to her that's upset her. And she is like, what were you thinking? We didn't raise you like this. Oh my God, you're going to get in so much trouble. Wait till your dad finds out. And there's this expression some of you in this room have heard before, WAIT, the acronym WAIT. Why am I talking? Do we really need to dive into the lecture the second we heard the scary information from our kid? I did that for sure. I had amazing lectures with my son when I found out he was smoking marijuana. My husband and I would sit down with him, and we were prepared, and we would say, like, we had all these great arguments, would show him websites, and all this stuff, and then he'd walk away, and we're like, oh, that went really well, didn't that go really well? And then, like, 2 days later, we're having the same conversation. So weight is really important. When you hear them tell you something, or when you find out that they're doing something dangerous, I can still remember the heat coming up in my body and feeling like, oh my God, he's gonna die. When we pause and think about, like, I gotta talk to the other parent, I wanna get on the same page as them, I wanna understand more about this, I'm gonna find out, I wanna be equipped to handle this, I wanna calm down before I talk about this. So that weight thing is really important. I share this with all my friends who don't have kids who've gone through what my son went through, and it helps all of them. Okay, so I think this is my last metaphor, my last visual. So imagine that your child is out on the water and he's in this little boat, and the boat's like going pretty smoothly. All of a sudden it gets rocky and it's treacherous and it's scary. And these are all of those scary things that life has happened, and the boat's bobbing around. For a lot of us, our inclination is to get in the boat and save him. We want to be in there with him and protect him in some way. When really we're not able to help them if we're in the boat, in the rocky, unpredictable waters with him. If, however, we stand on the shore, this is a really great presenter. I think he's been here too, Ken Ginsberg, who's a pediatrician, he is like the world authority on resiliency. I love this quote. I like to think of myself as a lighthouse parent. Reliably there, totally trustworthy, making sure he doesn't crash against the rocks, but committed to letting him learn to ride the waves. Being solid, being consistent, being there, being visible, modeling the good things, all that stuff. That's awesome if we can get there. You girls ready? Okay.
You're still
The buckets.
Are you still doing the clicker?
No. Oh, I'll play. Sure.
Yeah, you do the clicker.
Okay.
All right, so I'm just going to do kind of a brief overview of these. So these buckets are another metaphor. Thank him for that. So it's kind of like the progression of addiction. So bucket 1 would be this adolescent is trying a substance or experimenting. So that might look like the occasional pot use, the occasional weekend drinking. It's not too severe at that point. They're able to stop, and I think that's in another slide too, the description. So bucket B would be kind of in the middle, so we're going up the progression line a little bit, continues to use substances despite the consequences. So that might be mom and dad caught you drinking in your bedroom and you just got grounded. You know what's going to happen next time. You'll continue to get grounded. More and more privileges are being taken away, but you continue to do it anyway. So those consequences are meaningless at this point. And then bucket C would be behavioral or emotional changes and or dependency. So you're now seeing very clear signs visually, emotionally, your child is changing. So there's a huge list of warning signs that we have outside. There are some appearance, behavioral changes, and typically you can, all these, we could go on and on and on with different warning signs. What I like to tell parents is if you're seeing your child change, you know, at one point they're one way and now you just see this drastic change, there is something absolutely going on. Doesn't always mean that it's substance use. It could be something mental health wise, and I think maybe Beth can touch on that a little bit later. But there is something happening, and that's a very big cue for you to start digging. So I think we can go next one. So bucket A, again, these are just some details. Bucket A, tried a substance or is experimenting. So you're seeing like lifestyle responsibilities, they're continuing on as normal. No real changes at school. They're not dropping their activities, that kind of thing. So you guys can see what this says. No real drastic changes in mood or emotions.
Okay, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no way.
So then bucket B
You're not going to see it there.
is not there. So bucket B would be, again, like I said before, continued use, but no changes due to consequences.
I think minor consequences are coming up.
I think it's pretty standard.
If you impose consequences and they change the behavior, then that's working, so
Right.
then you're still in bucket B.
Right, they're able to, oh yeah, they're
Right.
able to stop.
Right.
Okay.
As opposed to.
Yes, and then this is where you're in that like serious red zone. You're seeing the legal issues pop up, you're seeing the changes, again, physically with their emotions. They might be super erratic, they might be isolating themselves. So you're noticing that this is a big problem. Consequences are there, they're not stopping, and some serious intervention needs to happen at this point. Typically, if you've gotten to this point and you haven't noticed anything prior, you'll definitely need to seek out, you know, professional help, even if you have noticed it. So, and I think here in the box, the escalation of substance misuse can be sudden or unknown. So you're not always going to pick everything up. If you suspect misuse or addiction, seek professional help. And one of the things that I'm really big on is trust your gut. You guys are experts in your children. So if your gut is screaming at you or even kind of knocking, trust it, ask questions, and if you're not getting answers and you still are feeling like something's not making sense, then it's definitely very important to reach out to a professional for help.
Okay, now it's just
Okay.
a recap.
My turn.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, everybody. So I actually, communication skills is something I do a lot with my families that I work with. So I work a lot with co-occurring adolescents and young adults. And when we do family therapy or family groups, we most likely are talking about communication. So especially when it comes to confronting a child about substance use or your concerns or you're having these warning signs about them, it's really good to practice this list that, you know, Kim so nicely kind of put in a form for you. The first thing is preparing. And it's really So let's say you're starting to be suspicious, or you see a warning sign, or you see paraphernalia, and you're like, oh my God, what's going on with my kid? Like, I just need to go ask them right now. Something's up with this. In that moment is just taking a breath and going, I need to figure out what to do right now before I just react. So it's really preparing yourself for that conversation. What is that going to look like for you? Do you have a partner, a spouse, or somebody that you need to communicate with to be a united front with that child? Because what I see oftentimes is one parent is not on the same page as the other parent, and that sends a very conflicting message to the child. And also, that also gives the child an opportunity to what we call a triangulate, which is not helpful at all when you're trying to set some family rules. So definitely prepare, set up the goals that you want to have with that child before you meet with that child. So another thing with preparing, I would say too, is set up a time to talk. That's going to be one. So when you're ready to have that conversation, okay, I'll read off of this, is, again, I kind of already said it with the preparing, just being I feel like I'm going to be repetitive, so I'm not going to repeat.
Well, I would also say, like, you know, make sure that the cell phone's not going to be ringing, a lot of
Yeah, that's a
distractions
good
aren't
one.
happening,
Mhm.
sitting down face to face, not while you're in the middle of 10 other things, multitasking. Like, really make it a point when you're ready to sit down and recognizing I'm too emotional, as you were saying.
Absolutely. And I think, again, I can't stress enough where you guys need to be on the same page, and you need to make that goal very clear. So that's really about just understanding the cues, definitely the cell phone. Anytime I do a family group or anything, cell phones are off or put away, because that's too much a distraction to anybody in that group. So then regulating your anxiety, I would say definitely taking some deep breaths. I would also say being able to use your partner in that situation too to help you with your anxiety, reading off of them, making sure you're using non-threatening language, not a lot of language that you would think is accusatory, but really having a conversation. I would also take note of your body language when you're meeting with that child or having that conversation with the child. You know, are you really frustrated and kind of doing the hands, you were doing that, like the hands in their face, because that's really not going to get you anywhere. You really need to maintain your calm so that your child is calm and feels okay to be in that meeting with you. So that's really important in regulating your own anxiety and recognizing that you're understanding your child. Some of the things I work on in my families is active listening. So when I'm talking about active listening, it's nodding your head. It's giving those cues, okay, I'm hearing you. And sometimes I even recommend to parents is saying to your child, I'm hearing you, but I'm still not understanding what's going on. Can you explain it a little bit more? Sometimes that's just helpful because it lets that child know, hey, they're hearing me, but there is a disconnect. So let me rephrase it, or let me think of something else to do or something else to say. So maybe they can understand what I'm trying to say. So that's really important is being ready to listen. And I would say there's quite a lot of times that a parent is hearing information for the first time. And what I really try to stress is please try not to react. That is going to be key, is try to go, okay, I hear you, this is really tough for me. Using that type of language instead of reacting. That's going to be key as well when you're confronting or when you're communicating with your child. The next thing is, I think I said that.
And then following through.
Follow through. So this is really important, and it's going to actually go in the next slide too with consistency. So almost every time, again, with family sessions, family therapy, is we talk about what is the follow through. When are we going to have that next time to talk about the situation? When are we going to talk about progress, if any changes happen, if we have to seek additional professional help, or if we're going to have to seek other outside support? You're going to have to come up with, it's really important to have that follow through, because if you're not seeing any changes, if you're not sticking to the consequences that you set at that meeting, then it's really just going to go to the waistline. And that's why I can't stress enough to parents in here, if you're not a united front and one of you says, all right, fine, you can have the keys to the car, like whatever, I don't want to hear you complaining anymore. And the other one's like, no, we said no keys to the car. Like, you have to like stick with that. That's what we said was a consequence. That is super important, that you guys need to be on the same page, because that kid is completely looking at that and taking advantage of that. So the follow through needs to be there. I always recommend like another follow-up meeting, another time that you could set with your child to be like, we'll talk with you next week, in a couple of days, how quickly you want to communicate with them, that's really up to your call. But everybody has to be on the same page so that child also knows there's going to be another follow-up discussion happening. And then consistency. You need to be consistent. That sometimes can be very difficult when you really, it takes time and it takes effort. And sometimes, you know, parents, I know, I'm one as well, it's exhausting. And sometimes you don't really feel like doing it yourself. But you need to be consistent, and you need to be consistent with your rules, with your consequences, and follow up. That's going to be like the three major things to be consistent with.
I would add too that, you know, keep it simple when there is something to you don't need to go into a whole like dissertation about why they should or shouldn't be doing something. No is a complete sentence. It can be a complete sentence. You are still the parent. It's still your home. It's still your rules. But consistency is just so important. But yeah.
And I think when we were planning this, consistency came up, and I think we touched on the fact that it might not be so easy to always be consistent across the board, but that's kind of back to what Beth was saying in the beginning. That's why it's so important to pause and not just jump right in all the time. So, you know, I know an example, and I know that if I get into a car accident, I can call my dad, and he's not going to scream at me on the phone. He's going to tell me, listen, it's a car, you're still safe, that's what's important. So you need that child to feel that when they are faced with having to address difficult issues with their parents. You know, you don't want to be afraid to go to a parent all the time. It's so scary as a kid.
Okay. So you may get on to the.
Yes. So this is another one of Kim's things.
Bottom up.
Yes.
Bottom up.
Bottom up. So I'm not going to mess up bucket B again this time. So basically, these are
your tools.
Tools in your huge toolbox. So down here at the bottom, these are like our foundation tools, things that we want to make sure that we always have consistent. They're definitely the things that carry us as a family. So family traditions are very important. Whatever it is that your family can do that's consistent, there's an expectation that, you know, at Christmas time we do this, or we know that every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 5 o'clock it's family dinner. Everyone is expected to be there. Phones are off, that kind of thing. Time together that is fun and light. So whether it's games, going to the movies, going to the zoo, whatever it is you guys can do as a family. Obviously, as they get older, those activities change, and it could be interesting trying to figure out what that is. But it's important to have something like that. And then obviously the quiet tech-free time. So if we're sitting out at dinner, everyone's phone needs to be put away, because everyone can literally look across the meal, the table, and everyone's on their phone. Like that's not what we're talking about. And then as we go up, modeling healthy behaviors and a consistent message, reflective listening, and emotional validation. You just heard Beth talk about those communication skills. That is a huge thing to have in your toolbox. The oxygen mask. So if you're on a plane, you want to make sure that you put the oxygen mask on yourself first, not the person next to you first, because you have to be able to help them. So you help yourself. So that goes back to self-care, thinking about what you need in order to handle a situation with your child appropriately or in a healthy manner. Calm demeanor, that's that body language, united front. So if you do have a partner that you can utilize, make sure you're on the same page. If you're not, that's a really good way for the child to kind of put you against each other. And they might not even do it consciously. It might just be something that they learned that they can do and be successful. The WAIT acronym, why am I talking? So, I mean, I have a toddler and an infant, and with my toddler, sometimes I'm like, Jill, just stop. Why are you saying anything right now? It's not doing anything.
And also, by the way, works for why am I texting? When they text you
yeah.
with a really kind of crazy question, an idea that they want to do, you don't have to fire right back and answer, you know, like, think about it and get back to them. An interesting thing that happens when you say, I can't answer that right now, sometimes they work something out for themselves. What a concept.
Seek your own unbiased support. So as a parent, you have every right in the world to have your own therapist, whatever it is, that someone you can go to. You can go to your best friend, you can go to your sister, your brother, and hear everything you want to hear. which makes you feel great sometimes. But if you're working with someone who's unbiased and they're not going to always tell you what you want to hear, you're probably going to get the best outcome that way. I think something that we talk to parents about all the time is when they're in crisis with their kids, what are you doing for yourself? Because if you are not sleeping, you're not eating, or you're whatever, you're all stressed out because of what's going on with your kids, you are not going to be able to effectively handle these situations. And then at the top, again, seek professional support for your child and your family. So family therapy, that kind of